Trump told them no. We like the idea of this continuing resolution, which strips much of the constitutional, congressional language that directs where spending can go. And Democrats in the House understood what it would mean to women, to families, to veterans, to women's health, to children. We understood what it would mean because Musk, Doge, and Trump had already begun the process. Their attack on veterans, their attack on women who serve in the military at the highest levels, their attack on women's health research, on Medicaid, on the Department of Education, where we send our children and expect them to be able to be treated fairly, expect children with disabilities to be able to get the assistance they need, expect those children in the poorest schools and communities to be able to have the opportunity to thrive. Because I think what you can understand about what women are about is about thinking about that future, about thinking about how do we make it possible for our children to actually grasp and live that American dream. And education is key. We do not rise, we do not thrive if we cannot get our children a quality education. But also, healthcare is key. When we strip the ability of 40% of the women in the country of their ability to have healthy babies because they got prenatal care, because they were able to give birth and then support that child with nutrition through the Women, Infant, and Children programs, when they know that those nutrition programs are going to continue so that their child will have enough food, that they will not be hungry in school, nor shamed. Because some children get shamed when they apply for food, nutrition, assistance in schools. So programs like in New Mexico, or last night we heard from Governor Whitmer, who described they did the same thing, where you provide universal school lunches for children so they are not hungry and they learn better. It is that kind of thinking about what do we need to move ahead. It is thinking for women about how Trump's policies just cost women and families too much. Let's face it, his tariffs are costing women and families too much, and women are often the ones who make the budget. We are the ones who go to the grocery stores. We are the ones who think about these costs on a daily basis, and Trump and his temper tantrum tariffs are costing women too much. He has done absolutely nothing to bring down the cost for families, but he has attacked women. He put us on that list. How dare you put us on a list of discouraged words? We are now on a list of discouraged words. Female, woman, females, because you need to make sure you get all those females. But on that list of discouraged words, is man or men on there? No. No. Only women are discouraged and attacked. So that's why when they go after research, they win and cut women's health research, right? And we are seeing them go after women as if though we are not qualified to do the work we do, but when women know that when we make it, we actually had to push harder. We actually had to prove our merit beyond. Because there are people like Trump and Musk and those who put women, female, and females on that list of discouraged words who think we are not qualified. The opposite is actually the truth. And I am going to turn to some of my amazingly qualified, elected women of the Democratic Women's Caucus and to say how qualified we are. We are a historic 96 women strong. We are women warriors, and we are battle-tested for this fight, and we are ready for it. Gwen Moore.
Oh, thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I could just listen to you for another 10 minutes because you have really laid the ground. And you know, as long as we're talking about ridding the country of DEI, women are on the head of that shopping block, because we bring more diversity to our country than anybody else. But we certainly don't have the equity with regard to this misguided resolution that they have passed. You know, some of you are very young as I look around, so I realize you may not have seen the movie Gaslight. Any of you saw the movie Gaslight? No, I figured you didn't. But you know, it was a movie in maybe the 40s or 50s that showed a man wanted to make the woman think she was going crazy by turning the gas lights up and down and in a way that she would not realize whether it was day or night or whatever. Well, that's what's happening here. We're being gaslit. You know, one of the things that upsets me more than anything when it comes to talking about Medicaid, and that's my mission here today, is to talk about Medicaid and what impact that would have on women, is to see my colleagues say, well, you know, the word Medicaid doesn't appear anywhere in the resolution. We're not going to hear Donald Trump and, you know, we're not going to cut Medicaid. Well, when I look at their budget instructions from the Energy and Commerce Committee, they're told that they must cut $880 billion. Now, I just ask you, is it a coincidence that the federal share of Medicaid is $880 billion? And even if you think that that just happens to be a coincidence, literally, when you look at the jurisdiction, consumer protection, energy, numbers of other things that are under the jurisdictions of energy and commerce, if they cut everything else out, just zeroed out everything else in the budget and stood up to their promise of not messing with Medicaid, that would also include the Children's Health Insurance Program, which is Medicaid, wouldn't touch Medicaid, there would only be $135 billion left. The math don't work, y'all. I realize I come from the ghetto, but I did take arithmetic, and the arithmetic does not work. They are either lying, they have Stockholm syndrome, or they're just straight up trying to gaslight us. The reason that women have a disproportionate need for Medicaid, and here's why. About 60% of all Americans have health care provided through their employers. 60% of Americans. But when you disaggregate that number, you realize that only 38% of women on their own have health insurance. That means that they are receiving health insurance benefits through their husbands, who is carrying them and their kids on their health insurance plan. So that gap, doing a little arithmetic again, means that women and children, especially women who are heads of households or single parents, are particularly at risk. Children who may not be in a household headed by a man are particularly at risk. And it's not just about abortion care. There's a lot of care that women need as women. And places like Planned Parenthood and clinics that use Medicaid funds that diagnose and catch breast cancer early. And it says women need health care to stay healthy. All of that is at risk. Now, there are a variety of ways that they could make these cuts, and they've threatened to do it. That they want to. One thing they say all we're gonna do is get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. We're gonna make people work in order to receive Medicaid. Well, let me just say this: about 60% of the adults who receive Medicaid already work. Yep. Thank you. Yes. They already work. So if they're not working, it's because they are women who have other sort of demands on their lives. They got elderly parents or a spouse that needs care. They have children that they have to attend to. They have other demands. They themselves have some sort of disability or health care needs, which is why they're applying for Medicaid. And they calculate that by by requiring that people go to work, that is going to save them money. Well, it's not going to save them $880 billion, y'all. Our calculation is, at best, that would be about $100 billion, just to simply deny people the benefit. And so we're here today, House Democrats and women of the House Democratic Caucus are here to say, you're a damn lie with regard to your intention not to cut Medicaid. And we don't care how you dice it, slice it. We don't care if you do work requirements or block granted, or you prevent states from using and assessing private providers so that they can draw down more money from the federal government. However you do it, $880 billion out of the Energy and Commerce Committee is impossible to do without zeroing out or severely restricting Medicaid, a vital resource for women and children. I am so happy I could go on and on and on to talk about how this CR hurts women. But I have so many other of my sisters here with me. They can talk about the damage this is doing. And I think it's really important now to talk about education, as this administration seems bound and determined to destroy the Department of Education. And so I was hoping that Representative Stansbury... Oh. Well, what are you talking about, Ms. Stansbury?
Oh, veterans and workforce. Labor. I'll talk about education.
No, you don't have to. Ms. Michi will talk about that. But we have to talk about all of this because these are women's issues. And Ms. Stansbury is going to talk about labor issues and veterans issues. You couldn't have paid me this time a couple of years ago to take a bet that Republicans would cut veterans' health care. You couldn't have paid me to believe that. And so I want to hear more about that from Representative Stansbury, and I yield to you now.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, and we stand here today 14 and a half hours before a government shutdown. And I think it's very obvious that the Republicans and the Donald Trump and Elon Musk administration are ready to drive America off a cliff. They're ready to drive us off a fiscal cliff. They're ready to drive us off a financial cliff. And they are ready to tank our economy and our federal government if we do not comply with their social engineering of the federal government. And the women of the Democratic caucus are fighting back. It's important to understand that this is the largest number of Democratic women to ever represent this country in American history. We represent the diverse fabric of this country, and we stand on the shoulders of the women who came before us, who raised us to be strong leaders ourselves. And I would not be standing here today if it was not for my mother, who in her own humble way was a leader in the labor movement as a seamstress who was fired from her factory sewing job and organized a labor union and became a leader in our community. And I've been thinking about her a lot this week in this fight as we're facing a government shutdown and we're on the brink of this dismantling of our federal government, because my mother was not a politician. She was just a humble seamstress. And this week would have been her birthday, her 76th birthday. But she passed away last week. Last year. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It hurts.
She worked at a Levi's factory, and she sewed 79,000 pockets on Levi's jeans. And they were being paid at a piecemeal rate, and she could barely support her family. And so she and a number of her fellow seamstresses tried to organize a labor union in the 1970s. And she was fired for trying to organize. And when she came back to try to fight back and held up a sign outside of the Levi's factory after she lost her job, she stood alone. And she ultimately took her case to the National Labor Relations Board, of course, which Donald Trump is trying to dismantle right now, and she prevailed. She was never able to get a job there at that factory again, but she was able to get a job at another union. And my mother became one of the first women machine operators in the state of New Mexico. And what my mother taught me is that sometimes when you stand on the right side of history, you stand alone. But right now, we do not stand alone. We stand as the largest, strongest, most diverse, and proud group of women to ever serve this nation in the Democratic caucus. And we are standing not only on the shoulders of our mothers and our grandmothers, but with the American people behind us. Because the American people have been clear that they do not support what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing. They are dismantling our federal agencies, firing thousands of federal workers. They are data mining your data. They are taking agencies that provide essential care and services to our communities and dismantling them piece by piece. And they are in the process setting us up for a collision course to get this CR passed in just a few short hours so that they can get on with the real agenda that they have, which is to dismantle the fundamental programs that have made it possible since the Great Depression for families like mine to survive. Because I would not be standing here as your congresswoman had it not only been for my mother, but for the food assistance and housing assistance and fundamental protections of our workers that made it possible for working class families in this country to survive, thrive, and put forward leaders for the next generation. So our fight is that fight. Our fight is the fight for America. Our fight is for the workers of America. Our fight is for the veterans of America. Our fight is for the military workers in America. And our fight is for the women of America. So I want to share with all of you that 43% of our federal workforce is women. And we have seen tens of thousands of women fired over the last several weeks. But yesterday, we got some good news. Because a federal court judge in California said that not only had Donald Trump and Elon Musk lied to the American people, but they broke the law when they fired thousands of probationary workers across this country. And so we know that not only are we fighting back in the courts and in Congress and in our communities, but we are winning. And so the Women's Caucus stands strong with the Democratic leadership of the House in fighting back and in opposing the dangerous continuing resolution that will give Elon Musk a continued carte blanche to dismantle our federal government. We stand against the cuts to the PACT Act funding that has made it possible for millions of veterans to access health care because of the harms that they endured over the course of their duty. And I say this as a partner of a proud Marine. We do not leave our veterans on the battlefield, and we will not leave them behind in this country. We will continue to fight back. So it's critical at this moment that we continue to stand strong with our shoulders back and continue to fight for the American people. And the Women's Caucus is united in that fight. And with that, I turn it to my wonderful and amazing colleague who leads on so many issues in the sciences and education, Suzanne Bonamici.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Stansbury. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm going to talk about education, which is an issue that does not just affect women. It affects women, children, families, and the economy. You know, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who probably never set foot in a public school or a public school classroom, they're waging a war, a cruel war on public education in this country. I'm Suzanne Bonamici. I represent the 1st Congressional District of Oregon, and before I came to Congress, I fought for education issues for public education in the state legislature, and I spent years as a public school parent. I'm a public school graduate myself. I spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours in public schools, volunteering and advocating for a strong system of public education, because it is the path to a better future for everyone. Public schools do not discriminate. They are there for every single student. And I tell you, the public is not with Donald Trump and Elon Musk on this. They appreciate their public schools. I just had 5 town hall meetings in Oregon 2 weeks ago. Each one of them was at a school, 4 in high schools and 1 in a community college. And parents, educators, people kept coming up to me and saying, what is happening? What will happen to my child? I have 2 children with disabilities, one mom told me. A principal just told me, if we don't have the federal funding, we won't be able to run our before and after school programs. We'll have less support for our students, particularly the students at risk. So why are they doing this? Why does the Trump administration want to close the Department of Education, cut education funding, and privatize education? Well, they say it's because education is up to the states. And much of it is. Much of the funding is, and definitely the curriculum is. The Trump administration and my Republican colleagues say they don't want woke curriculum, which of course they cannot define. That's not a federal issue. That is up to their local school boards and their states. So why are they doing this? Well, the federal dollars are so critical. Title I, for example, that is the funding that helps support schools with high populations of low-income students. IDEA, now, unlike our education secretary, I know that that means the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that means that every student, whether they have a disability or a special learning need, they will have the support they need in our public schools. But it's also higher education. I would not be standing here today without the Pell Grant and the work study that I got to get myself through college. First community college, then law school. And I did that because I had that federal support. There's also the non-discrimination, the civil rights that are so important to schools today. Now, the Republicans and the Trump administration, they want to privatize public education and send public dollars to private schools, including religious private schools. We say no. Public dollars are for public schools. And also, I represent not only Portland, which is urban, but a lot of rural communities. You can't tell a rural community where the public school is the heart of their community. We're taking away some of your public dollars, but here's a voucher so your kid can go to private school. There are no private schools. So we need to do everything we can to fight these cuts, to fight the elimination of the Department of Education, and to fight privatization. Because you know what the result will be? Larger class sizes, fewer supports for students, more discrimination, and a widening gap between the students who are already doing well and the students who are struggling. So we're there for this fight. I know the Democratic Women's Caucus stands with me, and we will indeed fight, and we will not back down, because public education is there to provide a path to a better future for every student. And I also want to add, in addition to the court decision that Representative Stansbury mentioned that happened yesterday in California, last night there was also a federal judge in Maryland who came up with the same conclusion. These indiscriminate firings of probationary employees, it's wrong, and they need to be brought back to work in every agency. So the courts are on our side. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to legislate when we can, litigate when we need to, and we're going to keep up the fight, and we won't back down. Public education is too important to our future. Thank you. And now it is my honor to turn it over to my amazing colleague from North Carolina, Representative Deborah Ross.
All right.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. And let me just tell you, I represent one of the fastest growing districts in the country. And ever since Donald Trump was elected, they have fired teachers on federal grants in my district. And let me tell you this, we will have no more of that. As my colleagues before me have stated, Trump's agenda will be especially devastating to women and children. This administration should be able to ensure that every child in this country has a healthy breakfast, lunch, and positive learning environment. Instead, they are working to illegally shutter the Department of Education. They could support millions of women and veterans who have courageously fought for our country. Instead, Trump and his congressional allies are trying to slash funding for veterans' health care at an extraordinary rate. North Carolina is one of the most military-friendly states in this country, and the amount of money that will be lost for people who have been exposed to toxic chemicals, burn pits, is an absolute sin. They could expand access to health insurance, but instead, Trump and his buddies in Congress are trying to cut funding for Medicaid, as you've heard, and the Children's Health Insurance Program. This threatens life-saving care for families and children. But I want to focus today on threats to child care. Elon Musk, who seems to think that child care is bringing your kid to the Oval Office, is dismantling essential programs that ensure families across the country can access affordable child care, including Head Start and the Office of Child Care. And we know he will not stop there. At the direction of an unelected billionaire, these offices have lost nearly 25% of their staff through Doge mass firings. Thousands of families and young children will feel the consequences of these firings across the country, and the effects trickle down to local and state child care programs. My mother was an early education teacher who taught me how important quality child care is at those early stages of development. I visit child care centers in my district frequently to talk to them about the challenges. And the number one issue I hear is they don't have enough funding to stay afloat because they cannot hire enough workers. In my home state of North Carolina alone, more than 13,000 children use Head Start for preschool. Why on earth would we gut funding for childcare when local programs are already facing federal shortfalls and millions of families can't make ends meet? And we are not hearing a peep out of this administration about the child tax credit, which lifted millions of children out of poverty and saved our child care facilities. They want to give tax credits to billionaires, to oil companies, but not to working families. Again, a sin. So that's why the Democratic Women's Caucus is fighting back. We've demanded answers from his administration about threats to child care, and we will not be silent while Trump and Musk try to destroy the lifelines that millions of women and families depend on. The women across this country are anxious about the future, but we're getting mad too.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
we are.
please know that the Democratic Women's Caucus will not back down. We will fight for you. Tell us your stories. We will tell the American public on the floor of the House, with the media, in our communities. We aren't afraid to show up for town halls. We aren't afraid to look you in the eye. So now I will turn it back to our amazing Democratic Women's Caucus Chair, Teresa Leger Fernandez, to close us out.
Thank you. Wow. You know, and I think what you heard today was just where the priorities lie and who is standing with who. And we heard about the fact that Democrats are standing with the programs that help educate our children, that make sure that our workers are protected, that make sure we get veterans care, that health care, early childhood education care, so mothers can go to work. Contrast that. Contrast that with what the Republicans are doing and what Trump and Musk is doing. We see this as investments in families. They want to take those investments away and send them to billionaires. They want to take the idea of public education away and put it into private hands. They want to replace diversity, equity, and inclusion with discrimination, corruption, and injustice.
Yeah.
And we're not going to stand for that, because we are going to call out when you start discriminating against women. It is not okay. That is more than half of the American population. When you start saying it is okay to have injustice, so let's close the programs. Let's close the programs that investigate discrimination, that make sure that we create justice. Like, when did justice become a bad word? I just don't get that. I don't get, like, when equity, the idea of bringing everybody together. Equity means justice. When did that become a bad word? And the thing is, Americans they believe in justice, right? We love justice. It is our rallying cry of who we are. Freedom is a rallying cry of who we are. But they want to get rid of that. They want to destroy the federal government and the programs that are necessary for our families, for our safety, and for our security. Now, we all agree we can make things better, but you don't burn the house down because you need to fix a problem with a leaky faucet. I mean, really? That's what they are doing. They are, as Stansbury said, driving us over the cliff. We heard somebody say they don't know which one is Louise and which one is Thelma, but Trump and Musk are going over that cliff last night. Was that Governor Beshear? Yeah. And it is true. It's like they are driving us over a cliff. And our job is to make sure that we constantly tell those stories. And as we heard today, listen to our constituents. And our constituents are sharing with us heartbreaking stories. And we are putting those stories up on our individual websites, on the Democratic Women's Caucus website, because we need to uplift them. And we are telling the American people, we are with you because we are you. The women of this caucus come from a wide range of backgrounds. We have suffered the things that the American women suffer. There are those of us who have almost died on the operating table from pregnancy complications. There are those of us who have our children through IVF or may have chosen to have an abortion. There are those of us who have been fired because we were women and had to take maybe some leave to deal with a child who was sick. We have a range of women. We come from women who've lost family to addiction, whose mother might have been addicted herself. We know what the struggles are like. And so we listen to your stories because those are stories we have lived. And I'm telling the American people and the American women, we will rise up and we ain't going to take this because it is wrong what they are doing to your future and your possibility. It is wrong how they are destroying your ability to pay for health care, to pay for groceries, to send your child to school. We will not stop speaking on your behalf. So we ask you to keep speaking up as well, to show up everywhere at our town halls and at all the other ones too, whether they're having them or not. Call your own. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. And then here, there. 1, 2, 3.
No, thank you for doing this. Several women around the country are looking to get involved. I know public service isn't for everyone, but what's your message to women out there who look at the growth of the Democratic Women's Caucus, look at the impact that you all are trying to make and say, I could see myself in elected office, but I'm afraid of the attacks, the misogyny, a lot of what you all have dealt with. What's your message to the women out there who may see public office as an option for them in this fight back that you all are describing?
So I call service, whether you're serving in the military as a first responder or as an elected office, is really an act of love. It's an act of love that comes from a commitment to your community. And if you feel that love and that passion and that calling, do it. Because when women run, they win. least in the Democratic Party side, if you'll notice, there are fewer Republican women this year. And so, but we do, and we can't talk about it. Oh yeah, we can talk about it here. Yeah, I was going to say because it is we can talk about it here. Elect Democratic women. I'm going to turn it over to some of the people who help elect Democratic women, and women lead.
Okay, well, I was actually going to be very nonpartisan about this. In North Carolina, we have so many candidate training programs that train both Democrats and Republicans together. Institute for Political Leadership, many different ways of doing this. And I actually advise people not just to go to the Democratic places to learn about how to run for office and how to speak in public, because you need to hear what the other side is saying too, and you need to meet people across the aisle. So I would just advise women who might be thinking about doing that to find in their area different kinds of training programs, no risk, and they may learn how to raise money, talk to people across the aisle, speak to a TV camera, all those different things. And so many people who have come out of those programs have gone on to successfully run for public office. And we can talk about some of the things within the caucus too.
Well, I just want to note that after the first Trump administration, thousands, if not millions of women across the country rose up, marched, and a lot of them ran for office. For example, when I was elected to the 1st Congressional District of Oregon in a special election in the beginning of 2012, there were no women in the Oregon delegation. We now have 5 of the 6 as women. So women are running, they're stepping up, and they know we have their back. And it really does make a difference to have diverse voices around the table, including lots of women.
Yeah, very briefly, I think your question is really apropos. Women have a view of themselves that is socially conditioned to not step forward and to lead. But I want, I think one way to encourage women to run is to demonstrate to them and tell them that you already are an expert at the very things that are taking up as policy things in Congress. For example, consumer protection. I mean, who was it that figured out that the pajamas, caught on fire and really did some consumer protection to make sure that those pajamas were no longer disallowed? I remember Jan Schakowsky, who's a congresswoman from Evanston, Illinois. Before she was ever a member of Congress, she joined, I think about her every time I go to the grocery store, she joined a group of ladies, and they forced folks to put expiration dates, labels on food as a consumer protection. Who's your first teacher? Your mother. And if things don't work out on the ground level with teaching, kids really get behind. Who shops for the house in the right school district to make sure the kids get a good education? Who's your first nurse? Who is it that stays up all night and takes your temperature and knows the difference between a little bitty cold and something that you need to be rushed to the emergency room? And so we need to encourage women. People say, well, Gwen, how are you going to do this hard job of being a congresswoman? I said, it couldn't be as hard as the job I've already done. Who is it? I know in my household that cleans the refrigerator out and keeps people from dying from all the stuff that's growing in the refrigerator. And so we have to convince women of their own agency and to tell them, look, just when you run, you win.
Yeah. So I'm going to go here and there. New Mexico, by the way, majority women in the legislature. You were next.
Thank you all for doing this. Does the Democratic Women's Caucus or House Democrats in general have a response to Senate Democrats who say that they're going to support the GOP spending bill that you all have now denounced here so clearly?
Yeah, the leadership sent out a response last night, and they pointed out that House Democrats understood the ramifications of what Republicans are calling a continuing resolution, and that we are standing with the veterans. We are standing with the women. We are standing with the families who will be hurt if Musk and Doge and Trump are able to continue their rampage over the federal government and the spending and the programs that they are already cutting. And in many ways, what I tweeted out was yesterday we heard, from General Milley, and just in general, he was talking about the fact that we send soldiers, servicemen and women, and they take an oath. And they take an oath to the Constitution and not to a man. And he said, they are willing to die for our Constitution. And we must really be willing to live and stand by the Constitution. And I think that House Democrats understood that we need to make sure that we retain our constitutional power and authority to say where the money should be spent and how the money should be spent. Because the founders gave us that right, because they know we have to go out and get elected every 2 years. We go out and do those town halls. We hear from the people about what they want. And that's our job, to say where and how the money gets spent. And there has never been a year-long continuing resolution. It has always ended up as an appropriations bill that has directions from Congress as what to get spent, and we stand ready. There's an alternative. It is a 30-day extension so they can get back to the table, because they were really close until Trump said, no, 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 no. I like this idea of sending me something without any guardrails.
Remember, this is the second CR. They didn't do their job the last Congress. They haven't done their job this Congress. And the American people are suffering for it.
Last question.
We're going to go over, actually, I had said you, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing this. And I'll try to make it a twofer sneakily. To follow up on his question, I wanted to ask if you think that new leadership is needed in the Senate in order for Democrats to have a unified message to the public across both chambers. And then if I may ask about more about what the governor said last night. You mentioned a couple of their comments, but curious about their general themes that they shared.
Well, we're House members,
Yeah.
and we know that new leadership is going to be Speaker Hakeem
Hakeem
Jeffries.
Jeffries.
We absolutely know there needs to be new leadership in the House, and it's Hakeem Jeffries.
Yep.
And, I just, I think we're trying to, I did let slip Bashir's comments, and I think we'll just say, what I'll just say, and other people can do, what I think is that we were inspired.
They said they had hope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We were inspired by all three governors and the amazing work they have done, and the fact that they are always focused on the fact that Democrats have delivered in their communities, that they've made sure that roads were built, and that orphan gas wells, which was one of my bills. I loved it when they talked about one of my bills. Were created, created jobs, addressed the environment, those kinds of things, and they shared with us what the drastic results would be with the Medicaid cuts, with the kinds of cuts that the Republicans were proposing. Do you want to
close out? Yeah. I'll just do a rapid fire kind of wrap up that hopefully catches several of these things at once. My message to Senate Democrats is there's still time. There's 3.5 hours until this cloture vote, and the American people literally are shouting from the rooftops that this is a 5-alarm emergency and that we cannot hand the keys of the kingdom of this big, beautiful democracy that we love over to somebody who has total disregard not only for the rule of law, but for American lives. And House Democrats and the Women's Caucus are 100% united behind the leadership of the House that has stood strong and stood tall and said, we're going to be on the side of the American people in this fight. So any of my colleagues in the Senate who are considering voting on cloture, the American people are shouting, please do not hand the keys over to Elon Musk. With regards to women who may be thinking of running, I want to just add my 2 cents. I'm really glad that you asked that question. If you are thinking of running for office right now in America, answer the call and run because your country and your communities need you. I ran for office in 2018 because that was my protest against what I saw as the dangerous administration of the first Trump administration. I never intended to run for office. And like so many women who are literally standing behind us, we answered the call because we knew that our communities needed us. And in 2018, I flipped a seat that not only had never had a Democrat representing it, I flipped it by 7 points and became the first woman and the first Democrat to represent a state house district. And it wasn't because I had any experience or because I knew what I was doing, but because I believed in the people and the communities that I represented. I had a voice inside of me that said, you need to do something, just like Kamala Harris asked us to do something, Michelle Obama asked us to do something for our country. And so if you are thinking of running, answer the call. And I'll say this and wrap up to that. 2016 was the largest wave of women that we saw run for office, the year that Hillary Clinton ran for president. And Emily's List, which is an organization that was created to help women understand how to raise money and network, told me when I ran for office in 2018 that the largest number of women that had ever asked them for help was 900 women in the 2016 cycle. In 2018, 42,000 women ran for office.
Wow.
Many of them are standing here today because something happened in 2018 that shook America awake. And we're living through that same tidal wave right now. So when you imagine what's going to happen in 2026, when you imagine all of the women, all of the people of color, all of the LGBTQ+, all the working class people who are being shaken awake right now and realize that they have to do something, I say answer the call, run for office, save our country. We need your voices. Don't be afraid because we've got your back and your country needs you.
Amen.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.